Allow me to foretell a future, wherein our end comes not by computer, nor fallout from atomic volley, nor superflu from laboratory. And though science did participate in bringing on the end of days, it was not, I say, what you'd expect. But before I start, let me interject. This song belongs among those tales that use cartoons to fill their sails and pass with ease into the mind to fill it with forms of fancy kind. But underneath these forms are hid vitamins made sweet for kids and salty too for the mature of taste, writ and start on register tape with a little bit of wink and a whole lot of jape. But as the end is nigh, I must make haste and get on with this apocalyptic opera composed within the satyr's genre. Now, while in the future the earth gets hot, for mankind, good life is still to be got. In fact, our species continues to flourish, and with gay industriousness we furnish the whole world round with cool designs used to customize our lives according to our tastes and mores, manacled to mere survival, no more, so that our appetites are checked, and beastly natures all subject by means of virtual and synthetic solutions, suppressing our pathetic passions without necessarily forcing on us abject poverty. And thus multiplies among us humans an austere race known as the vegans. These vegans had, for several generations, allowed no meat to enter their persons, partaking only of herbal foodstuffs, going so far as their canines rebuff and swap out with additional incisors. Their time spent on nutritional workshops, seminars, and propaganda. In summer, they hosted extravaganzas with many raw treats and probiotic cultures, vegetable games and not butter sculptures, wheatgrass tonics, colonic smoothies, consumed while watching anti-cow movies. And while the vegans were rather anemic and at track meets prone to a shortness of breath, they were by and large a kind-hearted folk, so long as their salads were free of yolk, and if their muffins included dairy, they'd make penance by means of scary whips lashed against their bony backs, bacon triggering panic attacks, and woe to he who with a meatball sub crossed their path. They'd think him a thug. But more than anything, what made the vegans seethe were any of the plants that they called weeds. For over generations, their lust for blood had been perverted by their unholy love of tofu, kale, and all those vegetables that from proganic farms came to their tables. And yet, any plant that did not grow in rows elicited in vegans tantrum throes of the most bloody lust. Even if a fruit it offered them, they perforce extinguished radically the herb they perceived as delinquent. Spotting a weed, they cried, "You must go!" then mulched it into their portable composts, carried about upon their lashed backs, affixed to shoulders by hempen straps. And then they would walk on, for vegans like to walk. Without much protein, what other fun's to be got? And so it came to pass that all the weeds saw to survive they must convene and pool their resources to prevent demise by means of vegan torment. Thus, in seclusion, the weeds convocated, and on means of survival, they deliberated until one of their number produced a plan to call upon an ingenious man, a man of the most frightful expertise, Dr. Othersuch, though he wasn't cheap, and how were they to pay him off? Since the rise of the vegans, the weeds' assets had troughed. They determined then to rent an office, and out of it run a skeezy non-profit, where through accounting innovative, they siphoned expenses administrative. Thus, under the aegis of saving the children, The weeds amassed funds just shy of 12 million, then carted these bills to the other such labs. Waiting in the foyer, a dandelion grabbed a magazine with which to pass time, though in order short, a frocked man arrived and asked them all what he could do them for. In answer, the weeds stood up on the floor and sang.
Sunlight, every other day is pouring rain. All you have to do to change the weather is stop being so mean and license your technologies. But you, Dr. O, so special, you, Dr. O, are way too cool, measuring science with your beakers and synthesizing glory in your lonely laboratory. We're in trouble, we are the weeds, we need your help. We've embezzled lots of dough through exploiting tax loopholes, but we'll work trade as your peons if you save us from the vegans.
Sounds like a challenge, the doc replied, chafing his beard and squinting his eyes. Then, opening a cabinet, he handed the weeds cups into which he wished them to pee. "But Dr. Othersuch," the weeds made complaint, "you must be aware that we don't urinate." "I ask you to submit a sample of whatever falls from between your petals. Just make sure it lands in the cups." To this they agreed, one by one, lining up and shaking out safely behind closed doors samples of pollen and pistils and spores. Whence the weeds donated their DNA, Othersuch had them sign an NDA and said their solution might take a spell. In answer, the weeds told him that they would double their payment if he'd rush their order. He bobbed the nog upon his shoulders and said, "I will do what I can to ensure you survive the wrath of the vegans." And then, straight away, the doc got to work, which honestly isn't that easy in verse to detail, for what kind of poetry is amenable to lingo of laboratory? And though it's true I could just as well use terminology alchemical, instead, a historical precedent I'll use to detail his experiments. Now, y'all know how in the 20th century, science at length proved atomic theory, which not that many decades hence had been considered mostly nonsense. For how might energy be equitable with matter? That was laughable to the Newtonian manner of thought espoused by foremost physicians who thought radiation was but superstition. But then, kaboom, science had proof of the limitless powers hid under the roof of the material world. Now, I ask that you try to imagine beyond the physical guise of discrete elements, there also exists vegetal powers that vigorously persist within leaf, under bark, vibrating in seed, radiations that give rise to the weeds and all sanctioned plants too. I speak not of genes, but the urges that spur forth the lowliest being to reach and stretch and populate the world. The doc attempted to isolate the frequencies of the willful verdure, and sticking all the weed bits into a sooty chamber, he nuked them with chloronic, trademark, vibrations until there arose a brand new vegetation that, although but a weed, would soon overcome, once and for all, the wrath of the vegans. Stay tuned for part 2. Good night.